I found out exactly what my parents were willing to do to me at 5:47 on a Wednesday morning with a phone in one hand and a cold cup of coffee in the other. The banking app showed one red line across the screen. Access denied. My grandfather's trust. The money he left me, $52,000, was frozen overnight. I called my mother first. My father took the phone. He told me soft as a Sunday that they had had to step in. That family came first. My mother said I was not thinking clearly, that I should let them manage it. I did not argue. I put on my blazer. I drove to the bank. What the manager found in that document, 4 days old, is the reason I no longer answer their calls. Welcome back to Revenge Drama Stories 1, where we sit with the quiet women who get underestimated and watch what happens when they stop explaining themselves and start letting the facts speak. If a story like this has ever lived in your own family, you already know the feeling in your chest right now. Drop a comment, tell me where you are listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Let me take you back to the version of my family I still believed in, which was only about a month before that red line ever appeared. I am April Anley. I am 34. I live alone in a small house on the north side of Linwood, Ohio, with a driveway that floods every spring and a job most people find boring at parties. I am a forensic accountant. What that means in plain words is that I read numbers other people are trying to hide. Companies hire my firm when money goes missing. Families hire us when an elderly parent's savings drain out faster than a body can spend them. I spend my days inside other people's worst weeks, following dollars the way a tracker follows a limp through snow. That month, I was closing a file on a woman in her 80s whose grandson had moved $4,000 out of her account in small, careful pieces. He thought small was the same as invisible. It is not. Small is just slow. I had learned a long time ago that people lie loud and numbers lie quiet, and the quiet ones are easier to catch because numbers do not get embarrassed. People do. My family thought I made spreadsheets. My mother once told a neighbor I worked in billing. I never corrected her. It seemed harmless then. The way a small misunderstanding seems harmless right up until the day you need someone to know exactly who you are. I let them think I was the daughter who was bad with money. I let them think it for years. The money was never supposed to be a secret, and it was never supposed to be a weapon. It came from my grandfather. Walt farmed 40 acres east of town for most of his life. Corn and soybeans and one stubborn apple orchard he refused to tear out even when it stopped paying. He was my mother's father, and he was the only person in my childhood who ever asked me a question and then waited for the whole answer. When his knees gave out and the work got too big for him, he sold the land. He did not split the money among his children the way everyone expected. He put most of it into a trust at Linwood County Savings, and he made one name the beneficiary, and the name was mine. People in my family have a theory about why. The theory is that I was the favorite. The truth is plainer and less flattering to them. I was the one who stayed. When Walt got sick, I was the one who drove him to his appointments and learned the names of his medications, and slept in the chair by his bed the last 3 nights of his life. The others sent flowers. I keep copies of everything, a habit from work that bled into my whole life. So somewhere in my desk at home, there is a folder with every paper Walt ever signed, every statement, every letter. I did not think I would ever need it. I thought I was just being tidy. Walt set the trust up with a lawyer named Ed Keller, a careful man with a careful office. And Ed told me once that the document was watertight. I believed him. I had no reason yet to test it. 2 weeks before he died, Walt gave me his watch. It is a brass pocket watch, heavier than it looks, with a hairline scratch across the face from a fall it took some time before I was born. The thing runs 2 minutes slow. It always has. When I was a girl, I used to think that was a flaw. And one afternoon, I took it to the drugstore counter and asked the man there to fix it. And Walt found out and was not angry, just amused. He took it back and put it in his vest pocket and told me to leave it be. A slow clock is still honest, he said. It is not lying to you. It is just 2 minutes behind every minute of every day, and you can count on that. You cannot count on a liar. You can count on a slow clock. I did not understand him then. I was 9 and I wanted things to be right, not honest. He pressed the watch into my hand in the hospital and closed my fingers over it, and did not say anything sentimental because that was not his way. He just made sure I had it. After he was gone, I started carrying it. I do not wind it for accuracy. I wind it so it keeps moving. When something at work goes wrong, when a file will not close, when I cannot find the dollar I know is missing, I put my hand in my pocket and feel it ticking against my fingers. 2 minutes behind and steady as a heartbeat. I had no idea that month how much I would need to remember what he said about honest clocks. I just liked the weight of it. My parents' house always smells like lemon furniture polish. My mother Lorraine has cleaned it the same way for 40 years, and the smell hits you at the door like a held breath. That Sunday, the table was set the way she always sets it, plates squared to the edge, forks lined up like soldiers. We ate pot roast and talked about nothing. And then, somewhere between the meat and the pie, my mother sat down her glass and said the thing she always circled back to. My father always played favorites with that will, she said. I said nothing. She said it lightly. The way you say a thing you have decided is just true. And she looked at her own hands when she said it. Some people in this family got more than their share. My father Gerald did not look up. He has gotten quieter in the last year, heavier in the shoulders. And that night he kept his eyes on the table. There was a stack of mail by his elbow, turned face down, and I noticed the top envelope had the navy blue corner of a bank logo on it before he slid it under a catalog without thinking. I noticed because noticing is what I do. I did not think much of it then. A man can have mail. A mother can be bitter about her father's choices. None of it felt like the beginning of anything. It felt like the same low weather that had hung over that house for years, the kind you stop seeing because it never quite becomes a storm. I helped with the dishes. I drove home. The lemon smell stayed in my coat for 2 days, the way it always does, and I did not think about the envelope again until it was much too late to wonder what was in it. My sister Renee came by my office the following Tuesday, which she never does. Renee is 4 years older than me and lives 2 towns over in Hartwell, where she handles paperwork at a title and escrow company, the kind of place that pushes property deals across the finish line. She was bright that day, brighter than the visit called for, and she brought coffee she knew I would not drink. She asked how work was. Then she asked, "The way you ask a thing you have practiced sounding casual about, which bank Grandpa's trust was parked at." I told her. She nodded like it did not matter. She asked whether I had anybody named on the account besides myself, a backup, somebody who could step in if I got hit by a bus. I said no. She said that was probably something I should fix, that she dealt with this kind of thing all day, that she knew a notary named Hal who was good and fast and did not charge family. I said I would think about it. After she left, I sat with the strange aftertaste of the conversation because nothing about it had been about me. It had all been about access. I made a note in my own head, the way I make notes about files, to go home that week and lock down the account settings and change my passwords and add the 2-step login I kept meaning to set up. Then a deadline landed on my desk that afternoon, a fraud file with a hard court date, and the week swallowed itself the way weeks do. I told myself I would handle the account on the weekend. I am very good at handling other people's money on time. My own, it turned out I had left a few days too long. The red line came on a Wednesday. I had not even sat down yet. I was standing at my kitchen counter, phone in one hand, the first cold mouthful of yesterday's coffee in the other, when I opened the banking app out of plain habit. The screen loaded, and then a band of red dropped across the top of it like a gate coming down. Access denied. Account restricted. Contact your branch. I set the coffee down very carefully because the alternative was to throw it. $52,000 and I could not see a cent of it. I called my mother before I let myself think. She picked up on the second ring already awake, already braced, which I would understand the meaning of much later. My father took the phone from her. His voice was soft, almost kind, the voice he uses for funerals. "We had to step in," he said. "Family first." My mother's voice came from somewhere behind him, closer to the phone than it should have been if she had really handed it over. "You are not thinking clearly," she said. "Let us manage it." I stood in my own kitchen and felt the whole shape of it arrive at once. The way the missing dollar always arrives at once after hours of looking. They had done something to my account. They were calling it love. I did not raise my voice. I have learned that raising your voice tells the other side exactly how scared you are. So I said the only thing I trusted myself to say. "Okay, I said I heard you." Then I hung up and I took a screenshot of the red line and I wrote down the time and I went to find my keys. I put on my blazer. I drove to the bank. The branch manager at Linwood County Savings is a woman named Carol Vance, and she has worked that counter long enough to remember opening Walt's accounts. I set my driver's license on the counter face up the way you set down a card. You are not going to pick up again until you get an answer. I told her my account was frozen, and I wanted to know who had frozen it. She did not give me the runaround. She typed, and her face did the small polite thing faces do, and then it stopped doing that. She turned her monitor partway toward me, the way you turn a thing towards someone before you have decided whether you should. On the screen was a document I had never seen in my life, a power of attorney. My name was at the top of it, granting my father authority over my accounts. There was a signature at the bottom that was supposed to be mine. The date on it said the document had been signed 3 weeks earlier. There was a notary stamp beside the signature, a name in a circle, Hal Bruner. I looked at it for a long moment. I did not say it was forged, though it was because I have learned never to make the accusation before you can make the case. Carol clicked once more into the file's properties, the back end of the document, the part most people never look at. Created, modified, author. She read whatever was there and her hand went still on the mouse and she stopped narrating to me the way she had been narrating. She did not say anything. She turned the monitor a few degrees back toward herself, then a few degrees toward me again, as if she could not decide who was supposed to be seeing this. Whatever was in that file's history was not what the date on its face had promised. I watched a careful woman go quiet, and in my line of work, a careful person going quiet is never nothing. It is the loudest sound there is. Carol asked me to sit down, and she pulled a chair around to her side of the counter, which is not standard, and that told me she had decided I was on her side of something. She explained it plainly. The power of attorney had been submitted to the bank 4 days earlier, along with a request to restrict my access and route management of the trust to my father. The document itself, the file had been created 4 days ago too, but the date printed on its face, the date beside my forged signature said 3 weeks. Carol said the two dates did not match, and a careful person notices when a thing claims to be older than it is. She said the signature looked, in her words, a little too even. I knew what she meant. Real signatures wander. They speed up and drag. A traced one holds its breath. I told her then what I do for a living. I told her I am a forensic accountant, that I spend my days proving exactly this kind of thing for other people. And I watched her look at me the way the bank teller never had, the way my own family never had, like the word for me had just changed in her head. She said the account would stay frozen, but now it would stay frozen as part of a fraud review, which is a very different kind of frozen. One protects them, one protects me. She printed me a copy of the document and slid it across the counter, and I folded it once and put it in my blazer pocket next to the watch. 4 days old, I said, mostly to myself. Dated 3 weeks back. That is not a typo. That is a timeline. Carol did not disagree. She just started a case file and asked me to spell my grandfather's name. I did not cry in the car. I want to be honest about that because people expect tears here and the tears did not come the way they were supposed to. What came instead was the cold, narrow focus I get at work when a file finally cracks open. I drove home and I went straight to the desk in my spare room and I pulled out the folder, the one I keep because keeping copies is just who I am now. I spread Walt's old papers across the floor, the trust, the closing documents from the land sale, an old birthday card I had signed for him years back. Then I laid the forged power of attorney down beside them, and I looked at my signature on each one. My real signatures all leaned the same wrong way, the way mine always do, the lowercase letters crowding at the end like people late for a bus. The signature on the power of attorney did not crowd. It sat. It had been copied slow and careful from something. And as I knelt there, I realized I knew exactly which something. Renee had asked to borrow a stack of family papers 2 months ago. To scan them, she said, for a family album nobody had ever mentioned before or since. She had taken them for a week. She had given them back. One of those papers had my signature on it, clean and flat and easy to trace on a light box, the kind of light box a title office has sitting in the back room. It was not my mother who had drawn that signature. My mother does not have the patience. It was my sister. The notary was a man named Hal. She had told me about herself. Sitting in my office drinking coffee, I did not want. I did the boring things first because the boring things are what win. I called Carol back and I filed a formal report with the bank's fraud unit. The same kind of report I help other people file, except this time the name in the complaint box was my own family's. Then I called Ed Keller. He remembered me before I finished saying my name. I read him the power of attorney over the phone slowly, and he made a small sound in his throat like a man stepping on a nail. A power of attorney is presumptively void if the signature is forged, he said. And even a valid one cannot reach into a trust and change who the money belongs to. The trust names you, April. Only you. Nobody can sign that away but you in front of witnesses on purpose. I sat with that for a second because it raised a question that mattered more than it first seemed. If the forgery could never legally take the money, then why forge it at all? And the answer arrived the way the answers always do, quiet and ugly. They had not built the document to win in court. They had built it to win in my kitchen at 5:47 in the morning before I was awake enough to think. Freeze the account, make me panic, call me unclear, unstable, grieving, and offer to fix the very mess they had made. If only I would sign the real papers and hand them the keys for good. The forgery was not the robbery. It was the crowbar. Whoever did this knew it would not hold. Ed said they just needed you scared. I told him I was not scared. I was something colder than that, and a great deal more patient. Renee called that evening, and her voice had the warm, worried tone of a woman reading from a script she thinks is invisible. Mom is just sick about all this, she said. Nobody is against you. We are all on the same side here. April, nobody thinks you did anything wrong. We just think the money side has gotten away from you a little since Grandpa, and that is nothing to be ashamed of. I let her talk. I have learned in interviews that the person who is lying will keep talking to fill a silence, and they will hand you things they did not mean to hand you. So, I said almost nothing. I said, I said, I see. I let the quiet sit on the line until she could not stand it, and then she stepped right into the hole. It is just easier if you let us handle the money side, she said. You have never been good with that. Then half a breath later, the slip. The paperwork is already filed, so really, you would just be making it official. I closed my eyes. The paperwork is already filed. She had said it like a kindness, like the hard part was over and I should be grateful somebody else had done it. She had told me without knowing, she told me that she knew the document existed and knew it had been submitted, which is not something a worried sister on the outside of a thing would know. I thanked her for checking on me. I told her I would think about everything. I hung up and wrote down the time and the words, the exact words, because exact words are evidence. And then I sat in the dark for a while with my hand around the watch. I took the watch out of my pocket that night and held it under the lamp. 2 minutes slow, the way it has always been, the second hand sweeping its patient circle a little behind the real world. I thought about Walt at his kitchen table when I was small, a pencil behind his ear, teaching me to read the farm's books before I was old enough to understand what money even was. He showed me how a column should add up and what it looked like when somebody had made it add up wrong. He taught me to find the number that did not belong by feel, the way you find a splinter. A liar will change the number, he told me once, but he will forget to change the time. People always forget the time. I had laughed at that as a kid because I thought it was just an old man saying. Sitting there with the frozen account and the forged page and my own sister's voice still in my ears, I stopped thinking it was a saying. They had changed the number. They had changed my signature, the dates, the story they were telling the family about my mind. But somewhere underneath all of it, in the bones of that document, there was a timestamp nobody had thought to change because most people do not know it is there. I did. I decided right then that I was not going to shout my way out of this. I was not going to beg my family to believe me or fight them with feelings, which is the one fight they have always known how to win. I was going to be quiet. I was going to let the time speak. A slow clock is still honest, he said. I was about to find out how honest. If you have ever had someone tell you that you are not good with money right before they reach for yours, you know that particular cold. Stay with me because I want you to see exactly how a quiet paper trail beats a loud family. If this is hitting close to home, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Did you see it coming before they did? The story reached me before I reached it, which is how my mother prefers to work. My Aunt Marie called 2 days later, careful and kind. The way you talk to someone you have been told is fragile. She wanted to know how I was holding up. She wanted to know if I was sleeping. She mentioned gently that my mother was so worried that everyone understood grief took people in strange ways, that nobody would judge me for needing a little help getting back on my feet. I listened to my aunt repeat my mother's words back to me in my aunt's softer voice, and I understood what had been built while I was busy filing reports. Lorraine had spent those days on the phone calling every relative she had, telling them all the same gentle, devastating thing. April has not been right since her grandfather passed. April is obsessed with that money. April needs to be watched. It was a clean piece of work. I will give her that. She had not accused me of anything. She had simply worried about me out loud to everyone until the worry hardened into a fact. By the time I would tell anyone the truth, they would already have been handed a reason to hear it as a symptom. I thanked my aunt for calling. I did not defend myself because defending yourself against a story like that only feeds it, makes you the woman protesting too much. I just asked her one quiet question before we hung up. I asked her whether my mother had told her any of this before or after the bank account was frozen. There was a pause on the line. My aunt did not know there was a bank account. Now she did. And now she was thinking. I went looking for the why because the why is usually sitting in a public record waiting for someone bored enough to read it. It did not take long. My father's name was on a business loan from 4 years back. A loan he took to keep his farm equipment dealership breathing after the big chain opened out on the highway. The dealership had not made it. The loan had. There was a lien filed against my parents' house, the house that still smells of lemon polish, and a notice in the county records that told me the lender had started the slow legal walk toward calling the whole debt due. I sat at my desk and did the math the way I do it for strangers, and the number my father owed was close enough to the number in my grandfather's trust that the two figures looked at each other across my screen, like a lock and a key. Family first. He had said it so softly that morning, like a prayer. He had meant the family's debt. He had meant the house. He had meant the thing he could not say out loud to his daughter, which was that he had run out of road, and the only money in reach with a soft enough guard on it was the money an old man had deliberately left to someone else. I did not feel triumphant finding it. I felt the particular sadness of understanding a man completely and liking him less for it. He was not a villain in a story. He was a frightened 64-year-old who had decided his fear gave him a right. The trouble with that, I have learned, is that everyone's fear feels like a right. It is only ever a reason. The invitation came wrapped as an olive branch, which is how the sharpest things usually come. My mother called, voice all honey, and said the family should sit down together like adults and talk this through before it got ugly. Sunday dinner. Everyone, Aunt Marie, the cousins, my brother Danny driving up from Columbus. "We are a family," she said, "and families work things out at the table, not through banks." I knew what the table was for. It was not for working things out. It was the stage she had been building for 2 weeks, the room where she would gather her audience and in front of all of them, fold my refusal into proof that I needed managing. She wanted witnesses to my unraveling. So, I decided to give her witnesses. I was not going to skip that dinner and let them try me in my absence, where the only version of me in the room would be the one she had been describing. I was going to walk in calm and rested and entirely myself, and I was going to bring the truth with me and set it down on the table when the moment was right in front of every relative she had so carefully recruited. If she wanted an audience, I would let her have one. I would just be the one deciding what they watched. I spent that week the way I spend the week before a deposition. I slept. I ate. I kept my voice low in every phone call so that anyone listening for hysteria would find none. And I made one quiet copy of one quiet page, and I folded it small, and I put it in my pocket beside my grandfather's slow and honest watch. The house smelled of lemon polish and pot roast, the exact smell of every Sunday of my life. And that was almost the cruelest part, how normal it all looked. The good plates were out. My Aunt Marie sat stiff at the end of the table. The cousins were too loud, the way people are when they have been told there might be a scene. Danny caught my eye when I came in and gave me a small, uncertain nod. A brother trying to stand in the middle of a room that had already chosen sides. My mother waited until the plates were cleared. Then she folded her hands and began gentle as a hymn. "We are all here because we love April," she said. "And because love sometimes means stepping in when someone we care about is struggling." She talked about grief. She talked about how hard the time since my grandfather died had been on me, how I had pulled away, how the money had become a fixation. My father studied the tablecloth. Renee sat beside our mother wearing an expression of brave concern, and when the speech wound down, she reached into her bag and laid a small stack of papers on the table in front of my empty place setting. Management papers, a pen on top, uncapped, helpful. "We just want to make this easy for you, sweetheart," my mother said. "Let the people who love you carry this." The whole table looked at me, waiting for the grateful tears or the ugly outburst, the two endings my mother had written for me in advance. I looked at the pen. I did not pick it up. I have signed a great many documents in my life that mattered. And I have learned that the most powerful thing you can do with a pen someone is pushing toward you is leave it exactly where it lies. I left the pen where it was. I folded my hands the way my mother had folded hers, and I kept my voice as level as I could make it, which is very level because I have given bad news to a lot of families across a lot of conference tables. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I think everyone at this table should know what the bank already knows." The room went still in the way a room does when it senses the weather change. I said it plainly, no heat in it. Someone submitted a power of attorney to my bank 4 days before my account was frozen. It has my signature on it. I did not sign it. It is dated 3 weeks ago, but the document itself was created 4 days ago, and the bank can see that, because every file like that keeps a record of when it was really made. I let that sit. Then I added the last piece. Quiet as setting down a glass. It was notarized by a man named Hal Bruner. I looked at Renee when I said his name just for a moment. Not long enough to be an accusation, long enough to be a question. My Aunt Marie's hand had come up to her mouth. The cousins had stopped being loud. Danny was staring at our mother now, not at me. And I watched something move behind his face that had not been there when I walked in. My mother's composure cracked at the edges. "You see?" she said too fast, her voice climbing. "You see how she is? She has built a whole story. She is not thinking clearly." But the words did not land the way they had landed for 2 weeks on the telephone in a quiet room with a real document hanging in the air. "You are not thinking clearly" sounds different. It sounds like a woman who needs me to be unwell. I had not shown them the metadata. I had not named what Carol saw. I had simply set one true thing on the table and let everyone watch which faces went pale. My father's was one of them. My sister's was the other. And my brother, for the first time in his life, was looking at the two of them as if he had never seen them before. The dinner broke up the way a storm breaks up. Everyone scattering for cover with their phones already in their hands. I did not stay. I said goodnight. I thanked my mother for dinner, which felt like the strangest sentence I have ever spoken, and I drove home in the dark. The call started before I reached my own street. My phone lit the passenger seat over and over. I did not answer. I let it record itself instead, a little timeline writing itself across my screen. 9:02, my Aunt Marie. 9:10, a text from Danny that said, "Only we need to talk." 9:15, my mother twice. 9:22, Renee. 9:31, a number with no name attached which rang once and stopped. The way a call stops when the person making it loses their nerve halfway through. I have a guess about who that was. A notary, maybe. Learning from a panicked phone tree that his name had just been spoken out loud at a family dinner. By the time I got home, the family had clearly held 3 or 4 conversations I was not part of. And somewhere in those conversations, a new plan was being stitched together. Because that is what frightened people do when the first lie fails. They do not stop lying. They build a bigger one and push the first one underneath it. I made tea. I did not drink. And I watched the screen go dark and light, and I did not pick up a single time. Let them talk. The person who talks to fill the silence always hands you something. I had a feeling I knew what they were about to hand me. And I was right. And it was worse than I expected. The news story came back at me sideways through the cousins, the way these things travel. By the end of the week, the family was being told that I had done it. That I, the one who works with fraud all day, had set up the power of attorney myself for some tax reason, some scheme to hide the money, and that now that the bank had flagged it, I was panicking and pointing at my own family to cover my tracks. It was a smart lie because it used the truth about me as the weapon. Who do you think knows how to fake one of these? Renee was saying she works with this stuff. She is the expert. And the worst part was that she had found a way to make Hal hold the line. The notary was not going to admit he had stamped a forgery. He was going to swear the document was signed 3 weeks ago in front of him by me the way the date said. Renee had a witness now, a man with a stamp and a story. And a story with a witness is heavier than a story without one. My mother wept to my aunt about how it had come to this, how a daughter could turn on her parents. My father said nothing to anyone, which I would learn later was its own kind of tell. They had taken the one thing I was sure of, the documents, the cold, honest paper, and they had built a second set of paper that pointed the other way. For the first time since the red line, I felt the ground tip under me. I had thought the truth would be enough. I was about to learn that the truth needs a witness too. They came for my work next, which is the one thing I had thought was safely mine. My boss, a sharp and decent woman named Puit, who runs our office like a tight ship in fog, called me into her office on a Thursday and closed the door, which she never does. Somebody had sent the firm a complaint, anonymous, typed, careful. It said that I was using my credentials and my access as a certified fraud examiner to intimidate and harass members of my own family during a private financial dispute. It said I had threatened to use professional databases against relatives. None of it was true, but it did not have to be true. It had to be plausible, and it was. Puit did not raise her voice. She said she was not accusing me of anything. She said that perception was the whole business we were in, and that right now the perception did not look clean, and until it did, she needed me to step back from anything that touched my family's matter and let the firm think about how to handle the complaint. I understood what she was not saying. A complaint like that, if it stuck, did not just cost me a client or a quarter. It could cost me my license. It could cost me the one identity I had built entirely on my own, the one that had nothing to do with being Walt's favorite or Lorraine's worry or Gerald's daughter. They had reached past the money now. They were reaching for the only thing I had ever made without them. I drove home that night and did not turn on the lights. I sat in the dark with the watch in my hand, and for the first time, I let myself wonder if being right was going to be enough to save me. Danny asked to meet me at a diner halfway between Linwood and Columbus Neutral Ground, which was the most honest thing anyone in my family had done in weeks. He looked terrible. He is the youngest, and he has spent his whole life trying not to choose between people, and now the room had no middle left to stand in. "I do not want this to be true," he said. "She is our mother." He turned his coffee cup in circles without drinking it. I did not try to convince him with feelings because feelings were the home field of the people on the other side, and I had no chance of winning there. Instead, I took the one folded page out of my pocket and I smoothed it on the table between the sugar and the ketchup. It was the file's properties printed plain created and a date 4 days before the account was frozen. I put my finger under the line and let him read it himself. The notary says I signed this 3 weeks ago, I told him. The document says it was made 4 days before they froze me. Both of those cannot be true. Danny read it twice. I watched his jaw work. If this date is real, he said slowly, then somebody in my family is lying to my face. I did not answer that. I did not have to. He folded the page back up along my creases, careful like it might tear, and he held on to it instead of giving it back. And that small thing, my brother, choosing to keep the paper instead of return it, told me which way he had started to lean. He paid for both coffees. He did not finish his. I know this part is hard to sit with. The moment a family splits into the people who want the truth and the people who cannot afford it. If you have ever stood where my brother stood, caught in the middle with a fact in your hand you did not ask for, I see you. Stay to the end because the quiet part is coming, and it is the part I would want you to remember. Comment the word truth if you have ever had to be the one who said it out loud. The bank's fraud investigator called me the following Monday, and his voice had changed since the start. His name was Reyes, careful and fair, and he told me what I did not want to hear. The notary, Hal Bruner, had produced his journal. Notaries keep a logbook, a line for every document they stamp, with the date and the signer, and a thumbprint or a signature. Hal's journal had a line in it dated 3 weeks back. My name written in, a little check mark beside it, just as if I had stood in his office and signed the thing in front of him. It matched the face of the document perfectly. Rahia said that as long as the notary swore to that entry, the case became one person's word against another's, mine against Hall's and my family's, and that a frozen account and a worried family and a notary with a logbook made a picture that did not obviously point my way. He was not against me. He was telling me the truth about where the file stood, which is what a good investigator does. I thanked him and hung up and sat very still. They had answered my honest paper with their own paper, and theirs had a witness and a logbook and a stamp, and mine had a feeling about a signature and a date that most people did not understand. I had spent my whole career trusting documents, and now a document was sitting across the table calling me a liar and wearing a notary stamp while it did. I felt the cold come up through the floor. For one long night, I did not know if the truth was going to be enough. That was the worst night. I will not pretend it was not. The complaint sat unanswered at my firm. My account sat frozen at the bank. My mother had a whole family half convinced I was unwell. And now a notary with a logbook stood between me and the only proof I had. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark with the watch in my open hand, and I let myself feel for about an hour the full weight of being a person who is right and losing anyway. Then I looked down at the watch 2 minutes slow, the second hand sweeping its patient little circle, honest in the only way it knew how. And I heard Walt's voice plain as the day he said it. A liar will change the number, but he will forget to change the time. People always forget the time. Hal had changed the number. He had written my name in his journal beside a date 3 weeks gone. He had a story and a stamp and the nerve to swear to it. But a journal is just ink. A man can write any date he likes in a book after the fact. There are 2 things he cannot write his way around. And I knew both of them because knowing them is my whole job. The first was the file itself, the real one, the one in the bank system, with its true creation time stamped into its bones by a computer that does not care what anyone swears. The second was simpler, and I cannot believe I had not reached for it first. A notary's authority is not a stamp. It is a commission, a license. And licenses have dates too. They are public. They expire. I put the watch down. I picked up the phone. For the first time in 2 weeks, I was not on defense. It took 2 days to pull the threads, and every one of them held through Ed Keller in the bank. I requested the native file, the original electronic record the bank had received, not the printout, the actual file with its history intact. Reyes confirmed it was the first and only version of that document ever logged into the bank's system, created on their end the day it arrived, never resaved or converted from something older. Its creation timestamp read 4 days before the freeze to the hour. A page truly signed 3 weeks earlier would have arrived carrying an older history of its own. This one had none. A timestamp by itself is only a thread, but this one did not stand alone. The thread that finished it was the one I found in an afternoon and then made certain of through the proper channel. Notary commissions in Ohio are a matter of public record. You can look up any notary by name and see the day their commission began and the day it ended. So I did. And then Ed Keller requested formal written confirmation straight from the Secretary of State's office, the office that issues and tracks every commission in the state. The answer came back the same both ways. Hal Bruner's commission had expired in March with no renewal and no grace period on file. The power of attorney was dated in May, 3 weeks before the freeze, the very date he swore to in his logbook. On that date, Hal Bruner had no more authority to notarize a document than I had to land a plane. It did not matter what his journal said. It did not matter how loud he swore. You cannot notarize anything with a license you do not have. And the day on his own document was a day his stamp had already gone dead. The journal had one more gift in it, too. When Reyes pulled the whole thing, the entry numbers skipped. My line had been squeezed in out of sequence, a number that did not follow the one above it, written in later, and pretending to be earlier. He could swear to any date he liked. The calendar had already answered him. I called Ed Keller and told him it was time to put everyone in one room. I built the file the way I build every file, quietly in order twice. Ed Keller gave me his conference room for an afternoon, and Reyes from the bank came with the native electronic record and the notary journal, and we laid it all out on the long table, the way I lay out evidence for a jury that does not exist yet. There was the printout of the document's properties, the true creation time stamped 4 days before the freeze in plain machine type that no one can argue with. There was the page I had pulled from the state, Hal Bruner's commission, with its begin date and its end date, and the end date sitting 2 months before the day he swore he had notarized my signature. There was a copy of the journal with the entry numbers circled, the skip where my line had been wedged in out of order. There were my real signatures, 3 of them, leaning their honest wrong way, set beside the careful, upright forgery, so anyone with eyes could see the difference. And there was the trust itself, Walt's trust, naming me and only me, the document none of their paper could ever have touched, even if every stamp on it had been real. Ed looked at the table for a long moment and said it was the cleanest file he had seen in years. And I told him that was the only kind I know how to make. Then I called Danny and asked him if he would come Sunday to Ed's office, not our mother's table this time. He was quiet on the line. Then he said yes, he would be there and he would sit on my side of the room, and his voice did not shake when he said it. I asked Ed to send the invitations himself on his letterhead so that no one could pretend it was just another family dinner they could talk their way through. A lawyer's envelope changes how people read a Sunday. I wanted them to read it correctly. I wanted them to come already knowing the table had turned, even if they did not yet know how far. They came on a Sunday afternoon into a room that did not smell like lemon polish, and I think that alone unsettled them. Ed Keller's office is all carpet and quiet and law books, a room built to make people tell the truth. My mother arrived first on the offensive before she sat, saying it was a shame it had come to lawyers, that family business belonged in the family. My father came in behind her, smaller than I remembered, and he would not meet my eyes. Renee was bright and certain, a folder of her own under her arm, ready to perform the wounded sister one more time. Hal Bruner came last and sat near the door like a man who wanted to be near the exit. A heavy-set man in his late 50s with a notary stamp in his jacket and sweat already at his collar. Danny walked in and without a word took the chair beside mine. I watched my mother register that the small public arithmetic of which child sat where, and I watched it cost her something. Reyes introduced himself as the bank's fraud investigator, neutral, calm, there to observe and to answer questions about the account. Ed sat at the head and folded his hands. I had a single manila folder in front of me, closed. I did not open it right away. I let the room fill up with my mother's talking because she always fills a silence. And every sentence she spent insisting I was unwell was a sentence the others were now hearing differently than they had 2 weeks ago. Then I slid the folder 6 in toward the center of the table and rested my hand flat on top of it. And I watched how Bruner's eyes drop to it and stay there. I had not said his name. I had not said anything at all. But a man who has done something wrong always recognizes the shape of the thing that is going to find him out. And Hal had gone the gray color of a man watching the floor open. My mother was still talking. I waited for her to finish. Then I opened the folder. I turned the first page toward the room, and I kept my voice as flat as the paper. "This is the power of attorney that was sent to my bank," I said. "It says I signed it 3 weeks ago." I slid the next page out. "This is that same file's own record of when it was made. The bank logged it into their system 4 days before my account was frozen. The first and only version they ever received. A page truly signed 3 weeks earlier would have arrived with an older history of its own. This one had none. I let that sit. Then I laid down the page from the state, and I turned it so Hal could read his own name. This is the Secretary of State's own record of Mr. Bruner's notary commission. I said it expired in March with no renewal on file. The notarization is dated in May. On the day he swears he watched me sign, he had no commission at all. You cannot notarize a document with authority you no longer have." The room had gone entirely still. Hal made a sound, half a word, and then the rest of it came out of him in a rush, the way the truth does once the first crack opens. "Renee told me it was just family paperwork," he said to no one, to all of us. "She said April had already agreed. She just needed it notarized fast. As a favor, she said. You all knew." I did not know it was. He stopped and did not finish because there was no end to that sentence that helped him. Everyone looked at Renee. Her bright certainty was gone. The folder under her arm stayed shut. The escrow office gave her the light table and the access and the easy way to a man with a stamp. And now all of it was sitting on Ed Keller's table in the open. My father put his face in his hands. "I am going to lose the house," he said very quietly. Not as a defense, just as the true thing he had been carrying. "April, I am going to lose the house." For one breath, I felt the old pull toward him, and then I let it go because a frightened man is still responsible for what his fear does to other people. My mother stood up. "You would do this to your own family," she said, her voice breaking high and loud. "You would sit there and humiliate us, your own parents." I did not stand. I did not raise my voice to meet hers. "I find fraud for a living. I said I found yours." The room did not breathe. "You told me I was not thinking clearly." I said, "I have never thought more clearly in my life." Danny spoke then beside me, steady. "Mom," I said, "the date is the date." And my mother had no answer for the date because no one ever does. What happened after was not a thunderclap. Real justice rarely is. Reyes closed his notebook and said what he was required to say. That based on the documents record and the commission expiration, the bank would lift the restriction on my account once the review was formally closed, and that the matter of the forged power of attorney and the notarization would be referred to the county prosecutor's office. He was careful with his words, the way honest people are careful. "A referral is not a conviction," he said. "What the prosecutor does with it is up to them. But the bank's part is clear enough. Ed Keller put it in plainer terms for the family because they needed plain terms. The power of attorney is presumptively void," he said. "A forged signature makes it so, and even a perfect one could never have reached the trust. The money was April's the whole time. It was never yours to manage, frozen or not." He did not gloat when he said it. He said it the way you read a measurement. My mother was not looking at the documents anymore. She was looking at the door. Renee had gone very still, doing, I think, the same math I had done about her job and her access, and the word that gets attached to people who do what she did. Hal had asked in a small voice whether he needed a lawyer, which is the closest thing to a confession a careful room ever hears. I gathered my pages back into the folder in order the way I had brought them. On the way out, I stopped by Ed's assistant and asked her to send a copy of the commission record and the file properties to my firm to prove it. So the anonymous complaint against me would have something true to sit next to. Perception is the whole business, my boss had said. I was handing her the only thing stronger than perception, which is a date that cannot be argued with. I did not say goodbye to my parents. There was nothing left in me that knew how. Here is what the weeks after looked like, because I think the after matters more than the moment everyone wants to cheer for. The bank lifted the freeze. The money came back under my name where it had always legally been, and I did not touch a dollar of it because it had never been about the dollars for me. The prosecutor's office opened a review. Nobody went to prison that month. These things move slowly, and I am not in the business of promising endings I cannot see. But Hal Bruner's commission troubles became their own quiet problem, the kind a notary does not come back from easily. Renee was put on leave from the escrow office because a title company cannot keep a person whose name is sitting in a fraud referral, and the marriage and the mortgage she had been so desperate to save were now harder to save than ever by her own hand. My parents still owed what they owed. The lien on the house did not lift just because their plan failed. That was the saddest part in the end. They had risked everything they had on taking something that was never going to be theirs, and they came out the other side with the debt they started with and a family that knew exactly what they had done. Danny calls me on Sundays now. He drove up 2 weekends ago, and we did not talk about any of it. We just watched a ball game and let the quiet be ordinary. Nobody got destroyed. They just stopped getting to pretend. Sometimes that is the only justice a family gets, and I have made my peace with it being enough. My mother called me one last time about a month after Ed's office. I almost did not pick up, but I have learned that the cleanest endings are the ones you say out loud, so I answered. She did not apologize. She has never once apologized for anything in my hearing. Instead, she tried the old key in the old lock one final time. "You never think about this family," she said. "You only think about yourself." I sat with the phone against my ear and looked out my kitchen window at the driveway that floods every spring. And I was not angry. That surprised me. I thought about Walt and the trust and the years I spent letting them all believe I was the daughter who was bad with money. I thought about everything I had done in the last 2 months quietly in order twice. I thought about my family. I said I thought about this family the whole time. That is why I let the truth come out instead of burying it to keep the peace. Burying it would have been the selfish thing. She started to say something else. The same word she always reaches for. The one about me not thinking clearly. I stopped her gently without heat. "You told me I was not thinking clearly," I said. "It turns out clear is the only thing I have ever been." Then I told her I loved her because it was true and because it changed nothing, and I said goodbye, and I set the phone down, and I let it stay down. That night, I sat at the same kitchen counter where the red line had found me, and I took out my grandfather's watch and laid it flat in my palm. 2 minutes slow, the way it has always been, the way it will always be. I have never fixed it. I never will. I used to think the slowness was the thing that was wrong with it back when I was 9 and wanted the world to be right instead of honest. I understand it now. The world is full of people who will change the number, the signature, the story, the date on the page. Whatever it takes to make the lie sit still long enough to fool you. They are very good at it. My own family was good at it. But under all of it, there is always a clock somewhere they forgot to touch. A true time stamped into the bones of the thing, patient and a little behind and utterly unable to lie. My grandfather knew that. He handed me a slow clock and a watertight trust and a quiet kind of faith that the truth keeps better time than the people trying to outrun it. I wound the watch once, the way I do, not to make it right, just to keep it moving. It ticked against my hand, 2 minutes behind the world and exactly honest. I have come to think that is the only kind of time worth keeping. That is my story. One red line at 5:47 in the morning, one forged page, and a clock my grandfather never bothered to fix. If this reminded you to check who has access to your accounts, or to trust the quiet voice that tells you something is off, take it as your sign and do it this week. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.